Welcome to another episode of JShin Creative. Today we are going to look at what we can create with dynamic topology and how we can integrate our creation into Krita. So I'm just going to give you a very basic outline of what you can do in dynamic topology. So we're just going to go to the Sculpt tool. As you can tell, there's something called Dyn Topo, which stands for dynamic topology, and you enable this function, and with this you can manipulate the detail of your brush and how the polygons subdivide. So let's go straight into object mode and let's go into edit mode. So let's subdivide this. So let's choose the subdivide smooth option. Now we have subdivided our object. What we're going to do now is create something quite simple to start off with. So we're just going to look at how we can manipulate this object, and I'm just going to show you some very basic concepts using the F-Snake hook tool, which I use on a regular basis if I want to extrude objects. And what you would tend to do is that you would have a reasonably low detail size, so let's leave it at 20 pixels. You would optimize the brush so that you don't create too many polygons, and you would look at your symmetry options. So I just want to take it off mirror mode for the moment, and you can alter the strength of the brush, and you can also alter pinch and add a weight to the brush. So I'm just going to add a bit of a weight, increase the auto smooth, which I think is one of the most important characteristics of this brush. Otherwise you could distort the polygons to such an extent that it interrupts your illustration. And normally you would go into orthographic mode if you want to manipulate it. Just tone down the auto smooth. And you can also change the size of your brush. If you zoom in, you can add additional details. And as you can tell with this brush, this is very useful for creating branches for trees, or extremities for a human body, or a possible human face. And what you would do is that you would build this up and up and up. Another useful tool is the Inflate and Deflate tool, which can come in very handy. Add a little bit of an auto smooth option. Increase the strength. And this can come very handy when you've created the branches in question and you want to flesh them out a little bit so that you have more substance and that you can manipulate the branches even further. And I find this Inflate tool very handy indeed. And here again you can also manipulate the details. So if I want to reduce that to like 6 and I want to add some additional details, I can do so. And it creates these very nice organic features. If I feel that there are too many polygons or I'm not terribly happy, you can subdivide collapse, which gets rid of any additional detail that you don't want. Be careful with the number of vertices and the number of polygons that you create. If you have too many faces, then it will dramatically slow down your machine and ultimately lead to a crash. So be mindful when you are creating these illustrations that you do use the subdivide collapse when necessary in order to make corrections. And also be careful on how you extrude your polygons as well, because you can inadvertently cause a puncture in the polygon mesh. So let's look at how we can, for example, smooth out our illustration. If we've got too many polygons or it looks a bit messy, we can increase detail, press the optimize option, subdivide edges relative detail at 6 pixels, and this can be very handy when you need to smooth out an object if there's too many jagged edges. So this can be very useful indeed. Now, as you can tell, there are certain edges that you may want to fill in, and there's a tool for that as well, and that tool is the Fill Deepen brush. You can add a plane offset, increase the strength, add a bit of an auto smooth, and that's very handy when filling in areas that you want to fill in, adding extra dimension to your illustration, smoothing it out. I'll go to the Inflate brush again. Where you've got very steep, sharp edges, you can flatten them. That's very handy. You can increase the strength and the plane offset if you wish. Decrease it in this case. And that affects how it looks like, as you can tell. And you may want to use this tool when you've got all these extruded sharp edges, or you want to cut into an object. So let's increase the strength again. Let's boost it to almost to maximum strength. And this can be very handy when you want to create extra definition to your extremities or to your object that you're creating for a concept piece of art. Please note that dynamic topology is more of a sculpting tool, and if you are going to animate any object, then I strongly recommend that poly modeling is the way to go, and I will show that at a later tutorial. I personally do not use Blender for animating at all. I tend to use Blender for creating shapes and objects, which I can then import, render, and then import into Krita or Photoshop and manipulate further. And that's what I mainly use Blender for. But it's very useful, especially if you're creating a scene with highly complex objects. It's very useful to create an object that is three-dimensional, because then you can manipulate it and integrate it and create all kinds of interesting shapes and special effects, which you can then photo manipulate and use for a painting or a concept of a particular scene. And a lot of concept artists do tend to use 3D modeling as a base for making their virtual worlds, and you see that a lot in game art. So let's just look at other options that you can apply with dynamic topology. Let's look at this end nudge. So I'm just going to create some graphical components using my clay brush. I'm just going to increase the strength of that off plane and add some auto smooth. So I've got my details. I want to change them slightly and I want to give them a new perspective. So what I would do, increase the auto smooth on that one, is increase the strength of this brush and turn it around. If I don't want a smoothing the objects, remove that. And that enables you to create new images. It enables you to twist things around and create some interesting designs, which is very good for texturizing. Demonstrate with some of these objects here. So let's say I apply that to this component, turn that around, smooth that out, and I want to twist this object. So this is another one that's very good, and the twist object I find highly useful, and you can twist objects around. So let's say I want to make that much bigger, twist that object like so, look at that at another angle, and let's say I want to extrude it. Another one is F-grab, which is very similar to this snake hook, but there's a lot more control with this, I find, and can move the mesh around like so. Beware that if you do use this tool, you can get these funny indentations on the other side, so I'm just going to use my fill and deepen tool. I've got a bit of a problem here, so what I'm going to do, change that bit, inflate this portion of it and cut into segments. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to say, well, that is now complete and I want to use it for imaging, for image making. Now I would argue that you would render this initially, but for this tutorial what we're going to do is just simply take our object, change the color of our object, do a clayish color, look at sample rendering, so we'll jack that preview on up to 200, change that from CPU to GPU, and now we've got what we want. What we can do is just press print screen and go straight into our object to show as monitor. And from there you can paint and manipulate this object, and this is a very easy way of making your own renders, making your own objects, and just basically cutting around them and creating your own designs. So I hope you found this tutorial interesting, and there's going to be a follow-up tutorial on dynamic topology. We haven't covered everything yet, and I'm going to show you some illustration techniques that you can use on top of your objects. So all of that coming very soon, and thank you very much for watching. Just to let you know, new brushes are out. Please look at my DeviantArt page and follow the links below. Thank you for watching.